Good afternoon. At the Tuesday afternoon, BOCC meeting, going over some budget items with different departments. And I see first at the list, we have prosecuting attorney.
Just want me to open up?
Yeah, turn your mic on.
So we're here to, I guess, review my budgets for the upcoming 2 years. A lot of my budget is salary and benefits related, which Kathy and I did talk about earlier today. And I know she's going to be looking at some things related to that as to kind of how it came out in the budgets. But generally speaking, with regard to my office as to any requests that I guess perhaps are not already a part of the office currently, there's a few requests, mostly I guess there's just some increase in certain line items. One being office supplies. Our currently allocation is 20,000. We've asked for 25,000. Basically, that's the account we use to buy everything for our office, from Office Max, paper, toner, staplers, pens, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, seeing the rising costs of everything in life nowadays, we've requested to increase that to $25,000. Other items that we have slightly increased in the requested budgets, meals and lodging, an additional $2,500. So I think that goes from 5,000 to 7,500, as well as mileage from $1,000 to $2,000. Primarily, those line items are utilized to get us to and from training. My office has 19 attorneys, 12, 13 support staff. Everyone tends to go to training throughout the year, whether it's victim witness training, district court training, attorney training. Each of my attorneys are required to do 45 hours of continuing education on a 3-year running cycle, which comes out to 15 credits / hours per year. As you guys are aware, my state association, Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, most of our trainings, minus a few specialty ones, are, for lack of free of charge. We don't have to pay tuition or whatnot. Now, we pay WAPA dues, but nonetheless, most of our trainings don't include registrations. Now, if I send somebody to a homicide training or some kind of other specialized training that's not provided by WAPA, that costs money. But most of our meals, lodging, and mileage are purely attributable to trainings put on by WAPA, whether it's for support staff or attorneys. For example, I'm supposed to be in Wenatchee in about 2.5 hours, not going, but I have 5 attorneys in my office who will be heading to Wenatchee in the morning for a 2.5-day training, which for those individuals will cover the 15 hours training required for them this year. So obviously tied to that is mileage, meals, and lodging. We do get some reimbursements from WAPA. Generally, I think it's $120 for the 2-day training. But nonetheless, we are asking for an increase in those 2 items of about $3,500 total. The only thing that it's been a discussion amongst my office for some time, and I know depending on the departments, but in talking to my attorneys within the office, we did add a proposal for about $8,000 a year for cell phones for our prosecuting attorneys. As of right now, I have a phone. My drug deputy has a phone. I would like to provide the option for whoever else would like to have a phone. Obviously, my attorneys on a daily and or potentially 24-hour basis are, dealing with investigations, law enforcement questions, search warrant review, whether it's during the day, middle of the night, phone calls, setting up, officers' availability for whether it's a motion hearing, a trial, whatever it may be. So for purposes of line items that with a substantial increase, we kind of Julie and I put our heads together and came up with the amount of $8,000. Whether that's adequate or not, I don't know right now. I do have the information from Verizon indicating that it appears that it would be about $45 a line. Having gotten a new phone maybe a year or so ago, through the business plan or whatnot, generally we get phones for, well, nothing's free, but free, assuming you sign up for generally a 2-year commitment. So I don't see a substantial upfront cost, and mostly just the recurring monthly costs, which I believe would be about $45 a month. Now that's an option. I know I've heard pretty recently about other potential options, like an app on a phone or whatnot, from maybe 2 people this morning, but that's not something that I've looked into.
So before we go, I have a couple of questions on you. One for the public. WAPA may not be the term with which you're familiar.
What's that, sorry?
WAPA?
Oh, WAPA is Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. So it's our state organization for all 39 county prosecutors' offices within the state of Washington. So we have an executive director, a staff attorney, 2 support staff currently, and they are up in Olympia.
Who supervises them?
Russell Brown is the executive director. So he answers to the board of directors of WAPA, which include a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and then some at-large members. I'm currently the secretary. So last year I was the treasurer. Next year I'll be most likely vice president. So there's an executive board that they answer to when it comes to staffing, budgeting, et cetera.
And how do they get their money?
They get grants as well as funding from each of the prosecutors throughout the state.
And how much is that in your budget?
In my budget, I don't know off the top of my head, and on the general budget that I have, if you go to general fund, the very bottom line, dues and subscriptions. And I guess, sorry, I apologize. There was an increase of request of 3,000 under that line item as well. But that dues and subscriptions, which is currently 5,000 with a request of 8,000, that covers WAPA dues, Westlaw. So our
So 5K to the,
no, that's so that 5,000, which we're requesting 8,000, covers WAPA dues as well as other dues and subscriptions we have. So bar dues to the state, Westlaw, which is our research system.
yeah, but how much to WAPA specifically is my question.
I don't have that answer right now, but I can get it
Okay.
to you probably by the time I leave here.
It's under 5,000.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then
I
my
want to
other,
say it's like,
my other question is on the cell phone itself. I resisted getting a company cell phone for a long time until it got into a PRR request, and I bought some software on my own dime for my cell phone in order to pull stuff off of it to give to the county essentially. And I very seldom use a cell phone because it's a pain to carry 2 cell phones.
oh, I know.
Is that going to be an issue with, I mean, you've been operating without the cell phone now for a while, right?
Generally office-wide, yes, but myself, no.
No,
I've had
right,
2 cell phones.
office-wide,
Yeah.
but
Yes.
that's what you're asking the 8,000 for.
Yes.
Okay, and that's, I'm having a little trouble seeing how that would be a useful,
Well, it's a way to keep work and personal separate. It's a way to maintain consistent communications. As it relates to any public records, it keeps that clean as to much easier to just grab that and provide it. And I
Yeah,
think it provides.
that part is true, but you're in a special category there where PRR is something regardless, you're gonna make the call whether you expose an email or not, or a conversation. While we basically, the default is whatever we do is open to the public. Your default is it's closed to the public.
That's not true. I mean, much of what we do is. completely
Every
open.
email I get from your office has a disclosure at the bottom saying you are not allowed to let this out and so forth without permission.
And I think most attorneys or most people have that at the bottom of their email. Basically, this is subject to public records. But I mean, obviously, a lot of emails that you receive from our office quite often is between what I presume to be you and an individual in my office that is quite often a question and the response being legal advice, which is generally one of those exemptions under public records, correct?
Okay.
So, and obviously in the nature by which a lot of your communications with my office, that would be accurate, but not necessarily for a lot of communications between whether it be attorneys or attorneys in law enforcement or whatever it may be, not necessarily fall under that exemption.
So what stimulated me to get the phone was this utter fiasco and invasion that by a very assiduous PRR individual. And have you had anybody come to you and say, I need a company phone because this is ridiculous?
I have multiple people in my office who
Okay,
are
I'm good.
requesting
All right.
phones, and so that's why I'm here on that topic.
Okay.
And I can completely understand it from their viewpoint, and that's why I'm making the request. If somebody made the decision that I would prefer not to have to lug around two phones nowadays, which are the size of what tablets used to be, then I would obviously honor that on their own
About
behalf.
this size.
So gone are the days of very small flip phones.
Okay.
But I believe that's kind of the summary of really any additions that have been included in my budget. I think Kathy and I have a little bit of work to do on the salaries and benefits portion. We had met earlier before lunch and kind of saw something. So I don't know if she's been able to dig into that at all on such short notice, but there seemed to be a decent jump in salaries and benefits between this year and the next 2 years, which we couldn't. Yeah, I don't know if she has anything.
I do have something to add on that. Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director. I did look into it. And one of the things I noticed in the 23 budget, which means we're going to have a budget amendment, is that his extra help for the criminal expenses was missing. It wasn't entered in the 23 budget, and that's about $40,000. So that was missing. And then I've got a couple of positions that looks like they were temporary positions and they've been accidentally added to the 24 budget. So that's another problem that we'll probably have to correct. So I'm going through and auditing every line item, every position to make sure they're correct. And it looks like possibly we duplicated some of your positions in the criminal, but also in one of the other funds, I think the law and justice. So I may have picked them up in both areas on the salaries, which we need to correct.
Thank you. That covers one of the questions, because he mentioned 31 FTEs, and you're substantially lower than that. And I assumed it was because the Law and Justice Fund, separately funded
Yes,
program,
separately.
is listed separately, which has always irritated me because we don't get a true picture of what his budget is, or any of the departments that have this divided
Have split
funding
salaries.
source. Our budget ought to be able to show that there's a source of money from the law and justice tax. That should be a revenue side. And combine all those employees together as far as I'm concerned. But the question that I have, and I'm looking ahead to the bottom line, and that is you're showing about a $300,000 increase in budget between this year and projected for next year. So what challenges are you trying to address with that? That's more than just
Yeah.
pay increases.
That's why we went and looked at all of this, because it was primarily in the salaries line. And so it looks like it's data entry errors on our side when we put together the 24 numbers. So that number will come down when we correct those errors.
And I know that this is the year that the Blake funded positions are supposed to expire. But we probably have to make sure that comes through, because I think we had heard all year long that, oh, no. The agreement was those are all added to the to the permanent staff. And I just remember saying, yeah, we're going to have to monitor that. We expanded staff to deal with the Blake because there was extra funding coming in, but that was going to go away. So then the argument needs to be made, if we needed to increase staff, the argument needs to be made, what else needs to be done,
So those would have been the temporary positions that she referenced
Yeah.
into next
Yep.
year. Now we can make this easy and just go with it. But yeah, so like I said, I think obviously we need to go through that, because I think a substantial amount of that increase, minus what I've talked about, for some reason is tied to that salary and
Yep.
benefits portion. So it's not 300, not even close.
I just see one line and it doesn't look like a huge deal, but under supplies, governmental services, it disappears in 25, and I don't know if that's meant to disappear or,
That was another item that we need to do some more research
Oh.
on.
okay.
And there's a $65,000 figure for dues and subscriptions on the next to last page, which is different from what we talked about a little bit earlier. So this is as much as a trial run for Kathy as, trying to see making sense of all the funds and stuff, because
On his dues and subscription, the 65,000 is 2023's budget, and it's the same for 24 and 25.
Yeah.
And then through 6 months, he had already incurred 30,000. So,
well, it is a little confusing because dues and subscription appears a couple of times.
Yeah. I
it-
believe that one's tied to PBK, our case management system.
and his department has a split between civil and criminal. And so he has duplication of expenses all through his budget because of that,
Categories.
because of the categories. Mhm.
Yeah, it's always been confusing to try to keep track of all those different expenditures, which basically then forces us only to deal with the increments, and we shouldn't necessarily always rely on incremental decision-making.
At the risk of being pedantic, I'd like to go back to your question, which is trying to recall how many people we brought on for the Blake decision change, and I didn't think I got an answer. Or you
I can
got
tell.
an-
I can tell you at least on my end.
Yeah.
So that was a legal specialist for my office, which expired in June. I never.
Yeah.
And then it was 2 attorney positions. If you guys recall, earlier in this year, I had come and said, hey, I have 2 attorney positions that are expiring come end of June. Can we just turn those 2 into 1, at least through the end of the year, due to the likelihood of a retirement within my office that would at least allow me the opportunity to hire somebody, get them up and running, and then they can continue on a more permanent basis if somebody's retiring. Sounded like a good idea. Unfortunately, I'm still 2 attorneys down and multiple positions down, so it hasn't necessarily come to fruition. But in my office, we had 2 attorneys and 1 support staff that were approved through that Blake. The support staff has not been filled since somebody left earlier in the year. And the two turned into one attorney position is currently open.
So at this point going forward, we don't have a position identified as a Blake attorney.
I have somebody who is doing it, but I don't currently have somebody that's,
But they're not just doing Blake stuff, they're doing other stuff.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, given where we're at, just with courts, cases, et cetera, I have people doing all sorts of different things.
Yeah,
And if I remember our conversation, or we talked about how this is an opportunity to test people out and give them a chance to demonstrate themselves as turnovers happen. And that's exactly what the case is with that one person. Because I mean, it does make sense. You can hang
And
on
as
to
of
the
right
people.
now, I'm very limited on people
Yeah.
options.
Is that a contribution to the turnover, or are they feeling overworked? That's all
I think I have a few areas which I mean, if I was going to put a wish list out there on what I think my office would benefit from to help with that, whether it's overworked, one position that we had approved earlier in the year was we'll call it the discovery position, because obviously the body cams, all that. So we have that position filled. We filled it internally. But the way things are going trend wise right now, sheriff's office is going to be going live fairly soon on the body cam. Right now we have Longview Police, Kelso Police, which keeps them busy. I know each of them have had to hire multiple people. Sheriff's office should be going live, but that was the intent behind creating, that discovery position within the office. From a workload standpoint, based upon number of cases, court dockets, ideally, well, okay, I'm amending my wish list in my head, but generally speaking, my office is our district court, which is misdemeanors, gross misdemeanors. Historically speaking, we've been able to handle that with one support staff, one legal specialist. Numbers of cases in district court are trending up for this year. But it's really going to be coming to a head when, a lot of our district court cases mostly come from state patrol, sheriff's office, Fish and Wildlife. So when they go live with body cams, that's a lot of work to process for that one court, which is generally about 1,500 cases a year, which is about the same as what Longview does. So I question whether, and I've had discussions with the person in district court, it's probably a two support staff position job, if not 1.5, which also kind of leads me to the attorneys in district court. We generally have had 2 attorneys in district court for about 1,500 cases, which is about, nobody likes to compare prosecutors with defense, but so they're basically handling double what the defense caseload is in district court each. In a practical world, we would have 3 attorneys, or at least maybe 2.5, somebody doing a lot of the dockets, which we did have for a temporary basis earlier this year, and then maybe doing something else. So 2.5 to 3 attorneys. That's how Longview is set up. I'm not comparing us to Longview, but given the number of cases that they have, which is about the same as us, give or take, let's say 100, they have staffing for 3 attorneys. And then ideally, I think realistically, people have changed a lot over the last few years in general. I know I've changed just due to COVID and everything, but our victim witness department, just in, obviously assisting victims, keeping them informed, trying to fulfill their needs and questions and whatnot. We have 2 full-time victim witness people. We have 1 person that helps. If we had an additional victim witness person, off the top of my head, I mean, in an ideal world, that would help a lot. A lot of my I mean, I know every department, regardless whether it's county government or private business, or, there's been a lot of turnover issues or in the last few years. I feel like a lot of my turnover issues have been tied to probably the amount of work on the people as well as money.
Well, there's another element there too, isn't it? I was going to ask you, we tend to want to pretend that a person comes to us and is going to be an employee for 25 years or something like that. But if you're young out of law school, you probably want to experience other places. So do you have a number where you think a young lawyer would it surprise you if they spent only 3 years? Is that acceptable to you? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? I expect turnover to happen just because people want to grow, and you can't always grow in the same place.
And that's true. And depending on what that person, I think a lot of people, and I was more talking support staff actually, but I mean, a lot of people go to law school with the aspirations of never wanting to be in a courtroom, sit behind a desk, review contracts. Some people absolutely 100% want to do public defense. Most of them, when they realize what public defense is, they change their mind. But some people go to law school purely to want to be a prosecutor. Some people want to go work their way up to the ivory tower. I mean, the benefit that I have is somebody, when a lot of people become a prosecutor or public defender because they want, or defense attorney because they want to get that courtroom experience. It's where you go to the ivory tower in Seattle, you could be a 10-year attorney and have never seen a courtroom in your life. And you can come to a prosecutor's office or a public defense office or a defense firm, and you can be in the courtroom in day one. You could have a lot of trial experience and then decide what you want to do. So you never really know, obviously, a lot of times people don't know what they want to do out of law school. Maybe it's just courtroom experience. A lot of times they think they know what they want to do, but then they change course. Or like more recently, I had somebody leave for, more money, teleworking, something somewhat criminal law related, but he just needed a change. After 16 years of being a prosecutor, he's like, I need to do something different.
Yeah. So I have a comment. Don't infer from my questions that I'm thinking we need to squeeze you on staff. In fact, I've said, and I'll repeat it, I think you manage your department quite nicely there. Reason I was asking about the Blake decision stuff is just, I don't think you're overstaffed. Whether we call him Blake or not, I'm just interested in making sure I knew what we thought was in, because the argument will come up again at some point. So don't infer that I have I'm bothered by this in general, just because we do not have enough funds to do everything that we should be doing. At least that's sort of my view. As long as there's a latency in meting out justice, I consider that a problem, but it's not a solvable problem.
Well, and the bigger issue is I think state of Washington is maybe second from the bottom on state funding for criminal justice in general. So obviously,
Yeah.
My pessimistic viewpoint is that I don't necessarily see the state funding down to the counties getting better, but only it seems like any issue that comes up, obviously they're doing their best in order to push whatever expenses they can back down to the county.
Yeah, I feel it's compelled to remind the public that where would we be if we didn't have the landfill $7 million coming in? It's a lot of money that a lot of counties don't have.
Very true.
Brian, one question that I had, and we've talked about it before in other years. You have a division that works in leased offices in downtown Longview, the Isn't that the witness protection or the child support thing?
Witness protection sounds cooler.
Witness, that wrong phrase. Victim witness. Victim witness.
Support
right.
enforcement. So
It's-
our support enforcement division.
That's for
so
child support. Okay.
Which is basically we're doing the
And-
state's bidding on.
And rather than bring them into a county-owned facility, you had talked about an advantage of continuing to pay the lease amount.
I actually had the lease on my desk. Something that I have considered, and I guess it's still under the consideration phase, is the potential of bringing them over to the Hall of Justice. We're currently in a 10-year lease that expires in about a year.
Okay.
Now it has built in, for beyond the 10 years, which actually the amount of the lease and what the increases are on it are fairly cheap, but logistically, if I have the room, which I could potentially create, I have kicked around the idea of bringing them over. Now that does raise some potential security issues that are on a different system. There's different certain requirements of segregation and whatnot due to their access to certain federal and state databases. But that is something that I'm considering, and I think
It looks like it's 44 to 50, goes up to 50,000, I think.
yeah, so it's
Something like
about
that.
just under 4,000 to just over 4,000 a month. 4,000 a month. Uh,
Yeah.
Currently over there, there's 2 attorneys, 3 support staff. Yeah, I used to have 4 support staff, but we did not fill a position a few years back.
Remember that, yeah.
I think there's the potential for an additional support staff retirement in the next year or so. There'd be discussions on whether to
Additional
fill that.
or we'll need to replace one.
There'll be discussions on whether to refill that position.
Yeah.
So it might be down to 2 and 2, but
And
these
I
are all
would
future
imagine,
issues.
I would imagine that would be relatively easy to quantify the caseload, how many cases you're having to work, so.
And the state monitors that mostly, because
Yeah.
if you recall, the state reimburses the county at a rate of 105 or 106% of those expenditures, so.
Oh,
add
That
5 or s-
I didn't remember that, so.
Add 5 or 6% to the bottom line, and that's what the state pays us.
Okay.
So I guess the state is giving me some money, but it's still.
So Kathy, in our, first off, thanks again for the notebook and the information. I like wandering through it. But we don't have a single page that shows his entire budget, do we? Ours doesn't allow us to do that for some reason.
Yeah, the very first page has it, right?
That's the
No, but-
FTE. But even that's partial because he
Yeah.
talked about 31 members of staff. So you have to go to the victim protection program and the child protection
Law and
program.
justice.
And
Law
those
and
are all
justice.
separately, but they're treated like separate divisions, with separate budget.
Right.
So it is kind of confusing. We don't know exactly. I mean, we have to add up those.
Yeah.
The expenditures. for
Our
those.
budget system doesn't have that capability. But y'all asked yesterday, and so on mine, I tried to do a summary sheet. So it's something we're probably just gonna have to do manually for now.
And
but-
it
but
is
it-
one of
it-
those strange things that,
Yeah, the only way to solve it is, it really is, goes back to something you suggested earlier, is that everything stays in their fund, but then there's a transfer in
Mhm.
from the other funds to help cover those costs as a revenue stream.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to keep everything in one, all the personnel, things like that, all in one fund. So it is a way to do it. It would mean redoing a lot of budgets. So at this time, I don't think I can get that done for this year's budget.
So what I actually appreciate the most about this discussion is how you've described the potential needs for expansion as the department grows, as population grows, as the population changes and become a little bit more acute in terms of criminal justice or criminal activity. So that we kind of know, we've got some markers that where the increases we may need to come up with. And again, it goes, that also relates to what Arne was talking about. Are we really overfunded? Are we overstaffed, or is the staff processing the amount that we would expect them to do? Which then gets back to how do you quantify the need and
Well, I mean, one thing looking at morale, I mean, I don't know, I see a lot of stress in my office. I'm also hopeful that, you know, for example, I look at the number of cases that are coming in. You know, juvenile court, and I'm going off trends here, so take through 7 months, divide by 7, multiply by 12.
Yeah.
So kind of what are we looking at, you know, this year? Juvenile is going to be up a little bit this year, most likely, but it's down from pre-COVID. So
Sure.
it went down quite a bit, but it's moving back up, but it's still not what it was, let's say 2019, 2018.
Yeah.
Superior Court number of cases, you know, being filed is down. You can probably attribute a good chunk of that to Blake, you know, felony drug possession. But appears to be down from last year in Blake. District Court, it looks like, and I don't know if Molly's going to make a face or whatnot, but according to my projection in District Court, we're looking to be up a bit. Generally, we see about 1,500. I see us getting about 1,600 at this point, but we also have the added factor of, you know, misdemeanor drug possession. So I kind of did a little digging yesterday on where our office was with that. And I also inquired perhaps with other jurisdictions like Longview or, you know, Kelso, Woodland, Kalama, Castle Rock. We've received about, well, with 2 of the sources, about 5 cases total in my office for possession in the last 2 months. Perhaps with Molly, she shows about 8. Longview was almost at 100. Those other jurisdictions who all go through the Kelso City prosecutor were about the same as us, 5, 6. So am I necessarily think we'll see in probably the near future, but you know, the number of drug possession cases in district court come to my office appears to be, you know, a handful every month or 2. So that's not a huge uptick in cases, but we appear to be trending a little higher in district court. So
That's
what do
right.
we have out
So
there?
there's that shift in labor to district court.
Yeah.
That's
So, I mean, I see we you know, we probably see an increase in, you know, basic lower level property crimes, thefts and whatnot that are kind of bringing that up. But obviously most interesting to me is we have the new drug possession in misdemeanor land. You know, what is that going to do to numbers? And, you know, we haven't received 100 referrals, perhaps like the city of Longview prosecutor's office has.
It just strikes me that 2025 is probably when the shortages are gonna have to be dealt with. You know, as everything levels out, we still have the increase in population, and you know, we probably still have the relatively same kind of, I mean, I hope not, but maybe the same percentage of the population involved in drug-related crimes, petty thefts, and all those things. That number inches up. Our population growth the last year has gone up faster than it has in previous decades. So there's that side of the picture too. So
Yeah, but obviously we all hope that the population increase are law-abiding, employed and or retired individuals enjoying life or, you know, enjoying the area. But, you know, so that's what I'm saying. I generally don't come to you guys for additional resources unless I feel like I really need it.
Yeah.
I do feel like I need it now, but I'm hoping that some more of the backlog gets addressed where it gets a little more back to normal. If it doesn't, then I'll come back. But you know, the slight downtrend in felonies and other things. And that, there's all sorts of other issues. We deal so much post-conviction stuff, PRPs, appeals, legal financial obligation motions, restoration of firearm rights, vacation of criminal convictions. And I've taken on a lot of these myself just to try to help out. You know, so there's a whole different can of worms of things that our office deals with that aren't accounted for.
And
Generally.
that also assumes that we don't have a major dislocation in our local economy, i.e. a mill shut down for whatever reason that throws more people into poverty. You know, because there's a relationship between the level of crime and the level of poverty. And that is frustrating. We know we have about a third of our population that qualifies for Medicaid, which means they're low income. So hopefully that doesn't get worse. You know, the employment reports are encouraging right now. So I'm a little bit optimistic about that, but always in the back of our mind is what if one of the mills shuts down, because it's not like that hasn't happened before.
I mean, we live in a community that is obviously, you know, freeway access, river access, small airport access, which is potentially great economically, potentially great for people stopping by, whether that's to live or just to do whatever. But also it creates scenarios where in the criminal justice system, that also creates opportunity. You go hang out at Woodland Walmart all day, I guarantee the Woodland Police Department's hanging out there most of the day because I-5 corridor shoppers, you know.
A great exchange, is that what you're saying?
What potentially provides economic opportunity also provides opportunity for things that we deal with,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
crime.
Yeah. A comment and a question. I think I would always be careful about saying or seeing any causal relationship between poverty and crime. There are a lot of just because you're poor doesn't make you a criminal. And I don't think you meant to say that,
No,
but
that's
but we should not accept poverty as an excuse for criminal behavior. But anyhow, so question for you, as the budget, if the budget were to be squeezed on you, and again, don't infer anything out of this, other than what I'm trying to find out is how you prioritize what your office actually does, because there's always more work to be done than you can possibly do. So you have to somehow negotiate that. And I'm asking, is there anything you can tell me about that?
Well, depending on how squeezed you're talking here, you know, my office, much like any prosecutor's office, has to make decisions on, you know, what they do or don't do, what they charge, what they don't charge. You know, obviously you kind of, for purposes of crime, you know, you kind of have to work it top down, you know, what absolutely 100% needs full investment, your most serious crime, your homicide, your major sex crimes, your, you know, major felony cases. You know, what decisions do you have to make in order to, if there's a reduced staffing situation or having to reduce caseloads, you know, that kind of starts at the bottom up, right? So in district court, we have, you know, what's called driving while license suspended in third degree, which is a misdemeanor, which has kind of been brought back a bit legislatively in the last couple of years, but nonetheless, you know, those are kind of the first cases that we, you know, if we're struggling, that we're going to either address in a more lenient matter or not at all. So, you know, a lot of times when we get driving while license suspended and then third degree cases in front of us, you know, if the person takes accountability and is willing to pay a fine, a lot of times we'll amend those to a no valid operator's license. Or if they're able to show their license, you know, if the case is pending and they're able to get their license, we'll amend it to a no valid operator's license, which is an infraction as opposed to a crime. You know, so kind of top down, bottom up. You know, a lot of times, I guess that would be the general answer.
Okay,
But-
yeah, I would encourage people to think about victim versus victimless crimes. So simple possession was a big deal and it causes a lot of trouble, but it's hard to find a victim. Now, when the person hits somebody over the head to get the purse in order to go buy drugs, that's a different story there. So I think we're probably approximately on the same page. Driving without a license, yeah, I think you'd probably make the good choice there. I'd always send them a nastygram saying, you've been cited for this and this and so forth, and but doesn't pay to tie up your attorneys on stuff like that.
Well, yeah, when I have two people handling 1,500 cases, is that a way to reduce the amount of, what they have to deal with? Yes, so.
Yeah.
Particularly during, COVID. And, I mean, that was a way we found to A, create some initial accountability, B, help our two attorneys, because in district court, I don't try to minimize district court. There's a lot of serious cases that happen in district court, whether it's, domestic violence, assault, some driving offenses, it's theft up to $750, which, somebody stole $600 from an individual, that individual feels just as violated maybe as somebody who had 7,000 stolen from them, right? Because they're dealing with it personally. So
Exactly the point I was trying to make. That crime has a victim to it. And I think 750 is an arbitrary number. Theft is theft and there is a victim.
Okay.
I'm about talked out.
So I think,
and
well,
we
we've
can- we
heard
can-
you still got some adjustments to work on and stuff like that, and we'll. Good.
By the way, thank you. I like this process where you hit the deltas between before and after in principle. Like you had no cell phones, now you have cell phones, or you're making a big change there, and bringing that to our attention is a big help because
And if we can find a way to get this down to one document, I'm good with that.
yeah, it's sort of our technique to do what I just suggested that the PA's office has to do.
Actually, what would be helpful to me is 1 page per department. So you'd have 3, just so that we can,
Mhm.
so it's not so confusing.
Any other questions?
Anything else you want to highlight?
Not at this time.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
guessing I might be back
Yeah,
on what we find, so.
Excellent answer.
Yeah.
we've got the law and justice fund to go.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, guys.
Clerk's office. Ooh.
Yeah, what do we have? Clerks, yeah.
Look how attentive the
Oh.
prosecutor is. He's such a gentleman.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Stacy Michael Best, County Clerk. I'm here to present my budget for 24-25. I believe you have my narrative and all of my expenses, revenues, and changes. Just to summarize a couple of major ones. One of the big ones you're going to see is the dependency publications that have been added to my budget. That was formerly a juvenile expense, so it's just kind of moving that expense from one department to another. We took over the juvenile functions as far as the court work, and along with that came the publication expenses.
And so the change was the state law that gave juveniles their own lawyers? I mean, was that the tie-in or?
No, the change was, when I came to you last year, late last year, about the juvenile clerks being deputized by me, but I was not supervising their work.
Oh,
So that speared a change on what was happening over there, and now all the juvenile duties fall under my office. So we got the publication expenses.
and one less employee. That's amazing.
It was easy talking to the clerk about that. She wouldn't let me out of her office until I agreed.
Yes.
One of the other major expenses that you're going to notice an increase on is a computer replacements. The administrative office of the courts had a program previously where a portion of the computers in our office were funded through AOC. Because of the transfer of information from our office to the state. They did not include that in their upcoming budgets, and the cost is now being put back on the county. Yet another county, you get to pay this now. So we have 12 computers in our office that were funded by AOC. They are set for replacement next year, so that's going to be almost $23,000 that's now going to fall on us.
On us.
That's all reflected in this top line. So are there other adjustments?
Sure.
Mostly for Kathy. But so what we see here of 2.264 for 25 and 2.38, that's kind of what we can hang our hat on at the moment.
Hold on, I'm gonna just double check. I believe so. So on, their computer, it's under computer hardware and software and hardware. There's a $26,500 item for 2024, that's those computers. And that request will also come to you when we specifically talk about IT request.
Got it. But that's still summed up in that bottom line.
Yes,
that's here.
it's still in
Okay.
the bottom line.
And that bottom line has a cost escalation for labor?
No.
Okay, that's still, that's got the step functions in there, but not the COLA.
Right.
Okay.
I don't really have any other major increases. I don't know if you've had a chance to review and have any questions. Basically did some cost of living increases on some of my line items. The publications and the computers were the two main ones. You're going to see a lot of decrease in revenues, and that's again, thanks to
LFOs going away.
LFO collections, yes. So the victim penalty assessment that was a mandatory fee is no longer being assessed. That's a $500 fee that was mandatory on every judgment and sentence. 54% of that $500 was county revenue, the rest went to the state. And that is now no longer being assessed if the defendant is indigent.
I mean, it is a pretty stark decrease in revenue sources. And $750,000. And then all of a sudden it's down to not even $500,000. And the difference is all made up by general fund.
Yep.
Again,
I think we're gonna have to increase our rent. Our rent charges. You understand what I mean on that? It's like.
oh, yeah,
land
yeah, no,
plan.
I understand. I'm thinking the summary budget line, if I could add one line that says, this is my revenue, same thing, but just the sum revenue on that one page.
On the summary page.
Yeah,
So I am curious, this may be a question for Kathy, on the bottom, the last line of her revenue charts. And I've seen it before, I think, under the prosecute, contributions from active fund. $100,000 or so. I'm not sure what that means.
Well, what that is the mental health tax. That's a transfer in. This one is, I believe that's where we put that, the mental health tax. We show it as a transfer in from the, anytime it's from the general fund, it will say active fund.
So mental health, or is that law? You have law and justice
I do have law
employees,
justice,
so I,
as well as a mental health.
as well as mental health. Okay,
She has both.
okay.
And law and justice has, it's in its own fund. It's just like we were talking about the prosecuting attorney.
Mhm.
It shows up actually in the finance budget, law and justice. Because it has multiple departments. It has clerk, prosecuting attorney, law enforcement. And I
And
think
it
there's
allows the
one other one.
finance director to have a little bit more control.
Yeah.
Yes. At least a previous one.
So I don't know if it's blasphemy or if of any use, but I sometimes would take the total expenditure like for 2025 and divide that by the FTEs of 23, and I get a number that's like 98,000 something per employee, and that to me is well within what I might expect. You kind of know as an accountant, you kind of give a broad brush view, is this looks sane or not sane? So to me, that looks like it is a sane number.
So, good point. Does the FTE on this front page include your law and justice FTEs?
No, it does
So
not.
that just shot your.
That makes
your
it even better.
strategy. Yeah.
No, it doesn't shoot it. It actually says, for example, if I did that division and it came out to be 250,000, now you start
Right.
scratching your head and saying, I better find out why. And then you'd come up and say, well, you're actually 3 more FTEs that you didn't take into account. Then you divide it out and you find out it's still over 200,000. Well, that's fairly severe.
Just to address the Blake positions as well as prosecutor's office did. I had 4 temporary positions in my office. I do not have anybody in those anymore. Those were good through June. And those positions have been eliminated pretty much. We either
Well, the people have been transitioned, right?
put them on full-time or they left for other departments, so we don't have any temporary. I have 1 temporary position right now that's good through 12 of 24, and that's my archive scanning. That was the ARPA funds.
How are we doing on the archiving? Are we pretty well caught up?
We're never gonna be done.
Stop producing paperwork.
We're trying really hard.
Well, we added the juvie to you.
Yeah, now I'm cleaning up all of the juvenile archiving, so.
Weren't the juvenile archives at one time in the Quonset hut over by the corner of
They were.
the parking lot?
They
Yeah.
were. We have moved everything
Yeah.
upstairs in the old jail. It's being stored up there, and we have a scanner set up in one of our huge storage rooms that we are plowing through.
Is that the one that was split?
Yes,
Okay, and all that paperwork at some point in time, that those boxes and boxes and boxes, what happens to them?
they get put in big shred bins and the shred truck comes out front. And they get
Excellent.
shredded.
So is that room now empty?
No.
So
No,
do you still have to go through the digitization of all of those guys? Oh, my God.
what's happening
I
is that we're-
imagine Drake decision just was horrendous in generating a lot more paperwork.
we're transferring the stuff that's in the jail comes down to the big storage room. So that's.
Oh, yeah. So, but, so upstairs is getting a little leaner.
A little less all the time.
Have you considered arson? I mean, I didn't,
I have permanent records. No.
I know.
So, I'm looking at the number, and again, it's the one with the FTE with you at 22 or 23, it changes. I thought we bumped you up last year. Didn't Arn come in with this recommendation for, was that 2 or 3, or? There was a big increase in the number of positions allocated.
we do, I don't know I'm not sure. I know at a time during COVID, I was very pleased as things slowed down there. Our clerk said, we're going to shift some of this effort to doing the digitization. And I thought that was an excellent use of staff. The digitization, by the way, isn't just scanning, it's categorizing.
Categorizing, yeah, so you can find it again.
And the proofing, because it's, like I said, a permanent record. So
Yeah.
we have to make sure before that shred truck comes that everything we're giving them is going to be good in 100 years.
What's your failure
have one.
rate on that? Zero.
Exactly. We have.
The
checks and
industry would
balances
love
in
that.
place.
Yeah. We make no mistakes.
Oh, I don't say that.
Well,
Everybody
you
makes
just did.
mistakes. We catch the mistakes.
So you don't make a mistake.
Let's look at it that way, yeah.
So I did have another question on the support that you give to the courts. We'd had a discussion about court commissioners.
Mhm.
And the judges had said they would eliminate the the part-time court commissioner in exchange for a judge.
Mhm.
And with that exchange, we're assuming you're already providing support for that court commissioner. That would not necessitate a additional full-time, like we did when we added the fifth, because that was a totally new position. And I got your very short cryptic email that said, yes, we will need one more. But you weren't part of the whole discussion about the transfer or, the elimination of the court position or the
Right.
commissioner position.
What's happening with the court schedules is they do have the 3/4 time court commissioner, but they're also using other court commissioners
Right.
to fill in. They've added courtrooms, so they have virtual courtrooms now where we used to have to man, just our physical courtrooms. Now they've added 2 virtual courtrooms, so.
That's at the jail and at juvie. And then there's
It's-
something at the hospital too, isn't there?
The hospital is gone. We're doing those on site now.
Oh, okay.
But there's the jail courtroom, the juvenile courtroom. There's the 3 courtrooms that we have at the hall. But then there's also 2 virtual courtrooms that are basically computers set up in an office that they're running a courtroom.
Oh.
Everything's appearing on Zoom, and that requires a clerk, just like if it was a judge sitting in the courtroom.
I was at an event on Friday night and Judge Cruiser gave the address, and she's on the appeals court now.
Mhm.
And she was talking about how everything is going to Zoom much greater than ever before. And that was one of the lessons learned through COVID, is that it's much more efficient to do Zoom
Much more efficient for some. I'll
for
say.
some. Okay. The clerk's job will
The
never
clerk's
end.
job doesn't change whether they're on Zoom or they're sitting in front of you.
And of course, if if there's a justification for another judge, it's because cases are up. And, as cases go up, there's got to be some kind of a relationship with the number of clerks that are necessary in both departments,
Yeah.
so.
Takes more than one clerk to support one judge, so. There's a lot.
I know
that
it takes an
happens
administrative assistant too.
behind the
apparently.
scenes. Any other questions?
So your total FTE. We have 22 here, but there's how many more from other funding sources?
I have a mental health tax position and a criminal justice position. I have 20 total. So I don't know if that FTE is including some of the temporary positions, is what it sounds like.
In that 20, that includes you.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so that's 21. And someone else out there.
Oh, it's my chief deputy.
Oh, okay. So those are the 2
There you go.
extra. Okay. And you're not asking for any more today?
It's not time for personnel requests.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So,
The plot thickens. Okay, I get it.
of course I'm asking for positions.
Oh.
We've asked all of our departments to not discuss the personnel items until We have that specific workshop.
And yet all we do is ask
and-
about positions, isn't it?
And that's on October 11th.
Yeah.
But Stacy has a special circumstance, and so she's probably going to come on another date to do her personnel request.
But what's the assumption for the budget here?
The budget does not have any new positions in it. Not until we have a discussion about the personnel request and you basically supported. or not.
So in the best light, then what we're looking at is the best lower bound estimate we have.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I made no assumptions that you would approve the personnel request.
Mhm.
And you're not assuming significant revenue increases either, right?
Correct,
Trying to be conservative on that.
correct.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking those shredded documents might produce methane gas. We can turn it into money.
Right? Only if we get the methane plant done, so it's a moneymaker. All right.
Is that all for me? All right.
Believe
Have a
so.
good afternoon.
Apparently for now it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the narrative too. That's nice.
Mhm.
Hi, Molly.
Good afternoon. It's Molly Martin, District Court Administrator. And Judge Bowden may be on Zoom. I'm not sure if he is or not.
No, yeah. Here we go.
Very good.
Want me to go ahead?
Yeah.
All right. So I don't really have any significant requests in the operations budget that I've
Could you bend the microphone? Thank you.
I don't really have any significant requests in the operation budget I provided here. Besides, I'm going to have the same IT requests that the clerk did regarding the computers not being reimbursed, but from AOC this round. That's, I believe, coming up this coming year is when those were expected to be replaced. So I'll submit that as an IT request. So most of these are just estimates, you know, maybe some cost of living increases, a few decreases based on spending that we've done here in the last few years. The biggest, I want to say ask, but change in our budget is going to be related to professional services and interpreter services. And historically, we've paid all of our court interpreters out of professional services, you know, along with any other professional service we had. But in the last few years, we have been getting reimbursements for some interpreter expenses from the administrative office of the courts. So I now have that as a revenue line. And those reimbursements come to us along with the cities, the municipal court expenses. They pay their own interpreters, but AOC submits a lump reimbursement. I submit data for all of them, and then they give us a certain portion back that then I have to parse out. Our portion to, you know, stays with us, but also some goes to the cities. So that's caused some complications in that I have to have a separate line for that and it as an expense simply to get some of that money back to the cities, even though it's only because there's already a revenue there as a reimbursement, if that makes sense.
So the need for more interpretive services, is that an indication the fish are running, the smelt are running?
That does make a huge difference. Yes.
It does. I mean,
That-
it is interesting.
Yes.
that,
Yes, but really a lot of my increase here is simply to pass that money back to the cities that we've received as a reimbursement. It's not an actual increase in our interpreter
Oh.
services. That's how we've done
It's-
that in the
oh, okay.
budget. So it reflects that I've asked for, $75,000 there, but really I took a bunch out of professional services, put it into interpreter for our county expenses, and also have a cushion there in order to reimburse the cities any money that they may have received as revenue. If there's another way to do that, that'd be great, but.
Yeah.
I didn't include a whole lot of revenue increases, but looking at the numbers, the Washington State Patrol's filings of traffic infractions has increased dramatically this year. They really dropped off during COVID. The last few years, numbers had gone down dramatically, and they have bounced back up. And that typically is directly related to any revenue increases we have. Those two are
So
very
you,
correlated.
you break through the COVID barrier in 2025.
Yeah, I believe they're hiring, they're backup staffed where they're supposed to be. So, I don't like to predict revenues as a court. We don't have a whole lot of control over it, but it just looks like we're going to be back up to where 2019 was.
Well, you're the one court level that still gets to collect money from individuals.
Yeah, I mean, Blazina has affected us to a certain degree. I mean, it wasn't nearly as much because our criminal fines.
Tickets
never-
are tickets, yeah.
Yeah, but there were some legislative changes recently for infractions that did make that a little more complicated, and people do have more opportunity to ask that those fines be waived.
Mm.
They have to actively do that. It's not an automatic thing though, and it has to be based on needs. So I don't know that that's going to really be affected, especially on traffic tickets through the state patrol. That isn't that clientele.
So just a question for Kathy, the order from left to right and right to left has changed depending. 2021 is the left here, and I think in the other one, it just did the clerk, and that was right to left.
Can you clarify which page you're looking at?
Probably should. No, okay. The first page, this
Summer?
summary page has it 2025 on the left and the other one's
Yes.
2021. Okay, that's why I'm flipping back and forth, trying to make sure I'm in the right column.
Yeah, there's a funny reason why. When we run it, part of these numbers come straight out of PeopleSoft. And the other part comes out of, I'm keying in the numbers from Budget Boss. So when they come out of PeopleSoft, they come out in this order. They come out the most recent year to the,
Most
history.
recent in the left is PeopleSoft.
Uh-huh.
Oh.
But Budget Boss
Okay,
has it opposite. They're two different systems, sorry. But that might be an enhancement that we might want to ask Budget Boss to put the requested amounts first, or maybe I can change our summary pages. Probably be
it's okay.
easier.
We just have to require that commissioners be able to read English and Hebrew, so they can go in either direction.
I just noticed it. Thank you for putting that out to me.
It's, yeah.
That's why those numbers kept dwindling as we go forward. Gosh. Oh.
So, did you have some more to say, or?
No, just
Okay.
waiting for questions.
If I do that magic division I talked about, I haven't done it, but it looks like you're pushing 150,000 versus 98,000 on the expenditures. Just take the expenditure for 2025 divided by 19. And I did that for the clerk of the board, Superior Court, and I get about 98,000. Here I get 150,000, maybe a little bit more. Can you help me understand?
I guess I'm not sure specifically. Which,
There are other costs involved in here somehow, and I'm trying to figure out where that is
in us versus the clerks?
per employee.
Well, we do have 3 judges in our budget. I don't know if that's what you're speaking of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I, okay, so that's
Yeah.
included in,
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So, yeah, we're versus Superior Court and then the clerk's office being separate
Got it.
entities. We're all mixed together here in district court. I believe we may have 1 employee out of law and justice funding. But besides that, it's all. in this
Yes, you
budget.
do.
yeah. Simple answers like that just really help me a lot to get perspective.
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
Yeah. Anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm good.
Mr. Weber, nope. Okay.
Well, I do have a question on the 58 cents, but that's when you know you're good.
Right. Okay, thank you. Um, I put, yes. Right, correct. Yes, I didn't include any of that in anything today.
I think this is a pretty good approach. Looking at these budgets early enough, get some questions cleared. The only thing I'd remind Kathy is that while I can concentrate on something, next month you ask me, well, don't you remember that meeting? No. What meeting? So,
No, of course, this is the first time I've been through it with the county, but
Yeah.
I'm,
Well, I bet your mind's just swirling.
well, I keep thinking, okay, how's it all gonna add up? And I know that that's coming. We're just looking at individuals at the
yeah,
departments at the time, but
It never adds up until it's too late to do anything about it. All of a sudden, it's a fait accompli.
yeah.
you know, this.
I'm hoping that's not true. I'm hoping that we will have an opportunity to present to you as basically a summary budget is where
Yeah.
you'll see that.
So, but what?
Where revenue and expenses.
So if we're going to be as tight on the revenue, overall revenues as we're worried about, we'll get to a point where we have to decide what is the acceptable reserves that we stand.
Right.
I mean, we have code that says 8%, 8.4, whatever, 1 month.
Right.
We've been running up almost 3 months
Correct.
reserves,
Correct.
and as far as the general fund is concerned. And in
You're leaving
previous
us,
years,
Molly?
we've actually set that forward.
Yeah, and not only in the general fund, but then as I was doing some of the areas that are under my my department, there's quite a few things that have reserves that we probably have too much reserve, and that we ought to look at, what can we do with some of the reserves that benefits the citizens and the county.
So generally, when I I was thinking that this is just a general discussion on budgets. Because we have an ability to reach into the pockets of people who may object but can't. Typically, I would want to start a budget year by just saying, how much are we willing to pay for the function that is represented by that department as a percentage of the entire pot? So how much of our effort should go to law and justice versus something else? How much are we willing to spend on IT this year in terms of a percentage? And as a rule of thumb, you could say, well, if you spend 100% on IT, you clearly can't do anything else. So that doesn't make any sense, but you're going to have to spend something. Where is that acceptable? Where's that number, that acceptable number? I imagine at fiber, you folks had to decide how much you were going to allocate to advertising, just what percentage of your budget you would do with advertising. And I don't think we can get there from here in this area, but it's always something to consider how we do a different model. Like we know we spend about 75% on law and justice.
I don't.
Typically,
my-
it's been about that,
Yeah, I don't.
huge, just
Yeah.
huge chunk.
Yeah, we do have part of our annual report. There's they put by function, the expenditures for your total. And so they have them by the bars functions.
Yeah.
And so that's available, on an annual basis, and it can be broken out by percentage of
But-
total.
But
Is
the
that what
bar's
you're doing?
functions would be how much to salaries and how much to supplies and how much
No.
for,
No, but those are accounts.
okay?
So your bars are general services. There's one for law enforcement. There's another for parks and recreation. It's more functional,
Mhm.
and I think that's what you're asking about.
Yeah.
And so there's an annual report that's prepared in those categories. And you could come up with we could tell you the percentage historically. And then we can also in the budget, in Budget Boss, it would have to be an enhancement that I would do. But I think it's possible because everything is in there with bars, numbers. And so it probably could be brought all together in summary fashion to tell you, based upon the budget, this is how much we're budgeting for judicial or for
Yeah.
public
Well, I wouldn't
Public
mind seeing that.
I
enforcement.
beg your pardon?
I wouldn't mind seeing
Yeah,
that.
that's a
Yeah.
nice, it's a nice chart.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The frustrating thing is that if you look back the last couple of years, the revenues are so out of whack because of ARPA. $25 million in additional money that's, and then that's been, that's got its own little formula that skews what we want, but
Oh, yeah.
yeah. But it's good to see it, how it splices out. I was gonna say, I would think law and justice percentage might have gone down, but then again, the money that we send over to Public Works is it's a separate budget almost, so.
Well, the bars issue, if I understand what you said, it actually kind of smooths over the thought. Like, as I'm thinking here, what goes into law and justice? Well, that bars sort of will define that for us.
mhm.
So I don't think we have to define it, so I'm glad to accept someone else's
Yeah.
assessment of what goes in there.
We'll have to ask the judge if he had any comments. Oops. Well, we have one last section, don't we?
I'm told that the treasurer's office is way overstaffed.
And the shocking part is we can cut that in half and it would make a dent.
That's a rumor, that's the rumor floating around.
I
Not
mentioned, that-
Not correct.
I mentioned the money that's coming in.
Yeah, of course.
They have. That's what they have. They have your, they have all the, yeah, they have what you wrote up. They have all the details. So. Hello.
Hi.
You're- Are you on? I don't think you're on.
That's right.
Hello.
We're gonna have to hurry up because my computer will reboot in 4 hours.
All right.
Should have done it this morning when I did.
How do we start here?
You confess all your sins.
Okay, well, Deborah Gardner, Cowlitz County Treasurer, and I had turned in my budget boss information. I don't really have any changes to my expenditures except for the postage increased. That increases every year, so I increased that. We do have a lot of revenues that come through the treasurer's fund, so I sent you that information, and if you have any questions on any of this, I can try to answer them.
I could ask you the other way around. Do you have any, or well, maybe it's asking you a question. Do you have any concerns about what's on here? Like, I think I'm okay, but I'm really not feeling comfortable that I've accounted for everything. I need more people. I have too many people. Anything like that?
Well, I do have the request for personnel that will be talked about in October.
Okay.
So besides the personnel, some of the revenues on here, I think we've talked about this before. The House Bill 1410 that adjusted the interest and penalty on personal or on property taxes.
Yeah.
So that revenue will change a little bit.
Could you refresh me on that?
It prior to 2022, the interest was 12% a year, which was 1% a month, and the penalty was 11%. Was it 8 and 3 yet? There was 2 penalties for the year, and then in 22, that was 21, and then in 22, there was no penalty on any
Right.
delinquent property tax. And then in 23, it is now 9% interest for real property with 4 units or less. And and no, let's see, I can't remember now.
Here it is. Oh, there it is.
But 4 unit or larger units and personal property still have the 12% interest. And there's no penalty on the real properties with 4 units or less.
Compared to how much property tax you collected, the interest and, penalties, did they ever amount to a significant number? And most people, most businesses make sure, well, they're going to pay those taxes. Not everybody, of course, but but it's a fairly small percentage if we, like
Right
$30
here.
million in taxes.
The penalties for real and personal property tax, the actual revenues for in 21 were 374,000. And in 22 was 232,000. And so far, through June, it was 76,000.
Yeah. Not much considering how many taxes.
Right. And interest on real and personal property tax in 21 was 804,000 and in 22 was 508,000. And so far, as of June, it was 328. So any interest and penalty that was already calculated before this House bill went into effect were still, those didn't go away. Those years are still on there. It's just any new delinquencies.
So on a property tax bill, there are all kinds of items on there, of which one item really amounts to the county, right? And then there's the mosquito control district, there's this and that and so forth. If somebody doesn't pay their property taxes, they get assessed the penalties and then interest rate. We talked about who gets that money of the penalties.
Current expense,
I beg your pardon?
current expense, the county gets
Oh.
the interest and penalty.
Okay, and how do we deal with the entities that didn't get paid? So it's they'll only get what they, so if on a property, $100 is owed to special district X. Finally, when that tax gets paid, the special district X gets only $100? And only at that time?
Yeah, and then if it goes into foreclosure and, you know, if a property isn't paid for 3 years, then we'll do the foreclosure process. And the minimum bid on those properties is any delinquent taxes and foreclosure fees, which the districts would at that time would get their funds.
But it wouldn't include the penalties?
The interest and penalties still go to the current expense.
Okay. When the foreclosure occurs, so it'll be basically everything you mentioned plus 3 years worth of penalties and interest rate.
Correct.
It adds up at 12% plus the initially,
Or 9% even, right? It's
Mhm.
9% now for
Well,
most.
that's just the
property.
initial rate, right? So,
Yeah, it's it continues every year.
so 9%, I thought like if I'm delinquent on a property, I'm gonna pay 12% right off the bat if I'm late a day, and then for every month I'm late, I pay an additional 1%.
No, it's just 1% a month.
Just 1% a month. I misunderstood what you said. Okay.
But the penalty,
Is it compounded?
it's just charged on whatever the balance is on the first day of the month. Just on the first day of the month, 1% penalty is or 1% interest is added.
So it is compounded then.
So, yeah, because next month they would owe
$101.
101.
Well, the interest is only calculated on the base amount. of
Only on the base
property
amount,
tax.
Okay, so it doesn't compound. Okay.
And now the penalty, when the penalty's added, it's only added on June 1st and December 1st of the year it's delinquent. So the penalty doesn't keep going year after year. It's just that first year is when the penalties are.
So if I'm delinquent for 9 months, I pay 9%. Do I pay anything else?
You
I pay a
would
penalty.
pay a penalty if you were delinquent on June 1st, there's a penalty. And then on December
And how
1st,
much is the penalty?
it's 3% on June 1st and 8% on December 1st.
See, it's different. The penalty is different from the interest.
That's, yeah, okay, that was a little confusing. So,
Mhm.
so at the end of a year, I might owe 20%.
Correct.
Okay.
So that was one of the changes. Should I just go through these?
No.
Oh, okay. We have our investment earnings in here, which Kathy and I have talked about it, and we feel like these numbers are low.
On which part?
This is interest investment earnings.
Yeah, I noticed that flipping through. I said, well, that might be a little low because rates have been climbing and this new group seems to be doing a pretty good job.
Well, and we probably will adjust those. Right now, it's real conservative number.
I'm okay with the conservative.
Yeah,
number,
I
yeah.
don't have any issues with being conservative. I just looked at it and said, well, yeah, that's pretty conservative, I think.
Yeah,
You're looking at the line that goes from like 992,000 down to 700,000.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Of course, you don't know, are you gonna have that same balance invested? You know, that's always a factor too.
Correct. And I mean, it sounds like the rates will still be good next year. But we don't know for sure what that's gonna look like. And I was gonna talk more with Kathy on what we should increase those to, if, or just leave it there and leave it as a conservative number.
Probably not going to
Well,
change
it
anything we
depends on-
decide.
It depends on the result of these other two hearings, personnel and capital. It's all got to
True.
balance.
Yeah. No, but they're very conservative right now.
Yeah,
It's always been amazing to me. Property taxes flow through your office, but not all property taxes.
What,
Does the road tax go through? Does that still go through your
Mhm.
office? Okay.
yes,
But sales tax doesn't go through your office. That goes through the auditors, right?
correct. It gets receipted into the auditor's fund.
Why?
I don't
Do you
know.
It
It's
just seems like that's a huge amount of money that the treasurer doesn't get to. Well, you get it. I mean, you get it to invest, but it's just weird. I don't understand why. the
Well,
legislature-
in the, the general fund, the fund that's 00199
Mhm.
has all of those funds in it. And when we look at investing for, we call it current expense for the general fund, we take, that as a whole.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't really matter what fund they're receipted into. It's into what department within the fund. It's all just one fund.
Except you don't spend $20 million.
No.
So, I mean,
But when we're budgeting, our revenues don't match our expenditures.
no, that's right. That's right.
Like other funds outside of the general fund, those,
So some of them have to balance. That's right.
Yes.
Because they're enterprise funds. Yeah.
yes. But,
Just it's a weird anomaly that.
yeah, and I don't, at the end of the month, when those funds come into this county from the state, they come into the treasurer's office.
you
And
have to-
we receipt them all into where they go.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just, always gone to the auditor's fund.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure why, but
How automatic is that? Is that like an ACH transfer into each account, or it's a big transfer into your big account and then someone has to go through and parcel it out?
Yes, it all gets receipted right into our checking account. And then we get a list from the state and it breaks out all the different revenues that we're receiving. And on this form, it has the bars numbers. So it tells, the bars will tell us what those funds are for. It's usually the same type of funds that come in every month. And then we do the miscellaneous receipts that receipts it into what department, what fund and department, whether it's county roads or the health department or the tourism or PFD or whatever it is. We do the miscellaneous receipt to divvy out all the funds to the different departments.
We get a lot of information from out of the bars also, don't we?
I'm not sure which bars you're referring to.
The bars numbers are very handy and helpful if you want to know, because on our treasurer's report, there's bars numbers on there. And if you are not quite sure what that stands for, you can go look at the bars and
I've never been fluent in bars. Sorry. It is like a foreign language.
And then, it's all set up that way, which helps the auditor do the financial statements and it, all gets rolled in through PeopleSoft, through the bars numbers and how those revenues and expenditures get reported.
So when we received the $24 million in a couple of three different batches from the federal government for ARPA and COVID relief, that was not sent to you. That was sent to the auditor, wasn't it?
It was sent to the treasurer's office from the state
Oh,
and we receipted it in. And if we get new money that we're not sure where it goes, we talk to the auditor or whatever department, or if it's a grant, we seek advice on where should these funds go. When the ARPA money came in, a new fund was created and those funds were put into the ARPA fund.
oh, so you consulted us because we created that fund. That's right.
Yeah, and all the funds that get created are by you.
So in this example, the ARPA funds came in, they go into your bank account pool and it's collecting interest from the instant it arrives.
Correct.
So the longer we don't spend it, the more money we make.
Yeah, you're 6 months too late. We spent most of it.
Have we spent most of it? We've allocated most of it.
We've allocated most of it. That's true. We've allocated most of it.
Yeah, I didn't bring that balance with me, but yeah, it hasn't all been spent.
Right.
It's sitting in the fund and it's invested.
Does what it, this is probably been answered, does what it earned have to be used under ARPA, or does it just go to the general?
I think that's more of a question for Kaylee, but I'm pretty sure that the funds, the interest earnings can be, I shouldn't even say, but I think it goes to current expense and it can be.
Yeah,
used
my
for
memory
whatever.
is that
Yeah.
it's our general fund expenditures,
Mhm.
current expense. Yeah. So when we sell an asset, like we're in negotiations with somebody to buy a portion of the Tenant Way landfill land footprint. We'll get a cash payment that'll be deposited with you before we can touch it.
Yes, any revenue, any money that any department deposits goes into our account.
Except sales tax.
Sales tax
It'll get to you eventually, but it
No,
goes
it
to.
all goes into our bank account.
Okay.
All of it comes into our bank. One bank account is where all that money goes. It's divvied out on the treasurer's report by whatever fund and department it belongs to. So if Public Works sells something, they will bring a check, or if it's a ACH or a wire, they'll give us a miscellaneous receipt on where those funds need to be receipted into. And if it's a new revenue, we'll work on figuring out what's the correct line item that it goes into.
The tricky challenges with restricted funds that we receive, where they have to be spent for certain types of activities, and there has to be a paper trail to make sure that it hasn't been commingled with other funds, which is why the Law and Justice Fund seems to be kind of treated so inconsistent. Well, it just makes it more complicated.
Yeah, it has a RCW associated with it and has to be spent in a certain manner. And that's why I'm sure a separate fund was set up for it. As-
Yeah, and any revenue or any expenditure that's paid out of any fund has to bypass through Carolyn's office, the auditor's office.
She checks to make sure.
And
but, yeah.
it has to clear all the check marks to, be able to.
I think the behavioral health tax is another one of those. It has to be only spent for certain things. Although we have a lot of discretion on what we spend it on. And I think
Same-
probably the document recording fee is the same way. We have to just make
Yeah.
sure it's documented that it's spent on the right things.
Yeah.
In rural public, there's the sales tax associated with rural public facilities. It has a very specific intent.
Yep.
So it has its own fund.
And then income from timber tax has to be divided out amongst all the taxing districts, because it shouldn't get a little sliver of it.
Yes, the timber, there's several different kinds of timber tax. We have DNR Timber Trust 1 and Trust 2 and other trust. And then we have the timber assessed value, TAV tax.
And that's on privately owned property, right?
No. The timber trust,
Timber trust is, separate.
the DNR manages the land, and when they sell the timber, we get the funds for it, but we get reports from DNR and it tells us what taxing district that the timber's in. And then the funds get distributed to that taxing district, just as any other taxes would. So we have a way to calculate by the levy rate for each of those district, whatever districts are within that tax code area, and then we disperse the funds to the districts.
That ends up being important, particularly for school districts who are collecting receipts from timber harvests. If you look at the boundaries of school districts, they are interesting, particularly the Kelso, because they kind of wrap around Castle Rock and Tootle, do this big arc because they're into timber areas. And it makes it a little bit interesting for if you happen to live in the wrong section of the county, you're got a Castle Rock address, but you're in a Kelso school district, but the closest school in Kelso is a long ways away. I mean, little anomalies like that, but it's all about getting timber revenue. You can't get them to adjust the boundaries very easily.
Well, no, those trust lands, I had printed out the 10-year revenue on that. And for Cowlitz County, if you look back in 2015, and this doesn't just come to current expense, this goes to the districts where these timbers are. We had, revenue was 4 million. In 22, it was 31,000.
So when the harvest was.
Yeah, and right now, they only have, DNR has $100,000 contracted out for those timber sales for this year. So those revenues have.
So the county has about 11,000 acres that DNR manages for us. They were forest lands that we not really inherited, but we acquired through foreclosure in the late 1930s during the Depression. And the understanding was if you don't want to manage them yourselves, DNR will do that. And so they're, they designate those various, and I think that's the trust too that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's
For-
what you're talking about, this
Yeah.
timber trust.
And we actually can, the law does allow us to reconvey that to our control for parks or park purposes.
Mm.
And that's about the only way we can get it back from timberland. But then it's basically withdrawn from revenue production unless we take advantage of a tree farm, as for recreation, but it is interesting. It's a lot of details. Right.
Okay. Anything else? Think we're good.
Hi, Emily. Uh-oh.
I didn't know if you guys had time to do that or if I need to put it on a separate schedule. I see you guys kind of put a placeholder for executive session on all of them, so I wasn't sure.
Oh, yeah, you need.
You need to
yeah.
be someplace.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So, and for, but say your name. Oh, yeah, there you go.
Lean
In
into that.
conjunction with the
Lean
budget,
into the microphone, otherwise you can't. hear you. You'll tell if you're.
in conjunction with the budget hearings, my only request has to be discussed in executive session. So I just was looking to see if you guys had time today or if we needed to get it on a schedule for another day. It would be a very short discussion, I think.
So is that because of pending
Pending
litigation?
Litigation, yeah,
Okay,
And short, 5-10 minutes.
max.
So we can do that. Executive session,
I do have.
pending litigation
I do have a commitment at 4, so, but
or
Oh, we should be.
we'll start with 5 minutes.
Yeah, it should be very
Okay.
short.
Okay.
so we'll head back there.
Okay.
I think we're done with that. Yeah. Thank you.
The board is extending the executive session for a period of 5 minutes until 3:34.
Okay, we're back from executive session. No decisions were made. Any final comments?
Not for me. This concludes our workshop for today.
Okay.
I just want to repeat, thank you for organizing all this and for
Yeah.
how you're doing it. It's
Yeah.
Well,
Wonderful.
thank you.
We may ask a lot of questions, but we're not being critical or sending any.
No,
I think-
thank you for the feedback so we can make some improvements.
Oh, speaking about feedback, is it, you probably can't because we're not in the same page numbers?
Page numbers.
So we could.
Budget boss doesn't print page
Yeah, I
numbers.
figured, okay. How about line numbers?
I would love page numbers.
Okay,
It's crazy.
Yeah, so like I said, my list is growing on budget boss enhancements.
So gentlemen, I do want to remind.
That's gonna be a line
Oh,
item
you gotta
somewhere,
go by
isn't it?
phone.
Yeah.
No, they were in good shape.
yes.
I just want to remind you, the notice came out for making your reservation if you plan to go on the field trip up the Toutle River on October 12th. They just need to have a count on how many to expect. So
October
you should
12th.
have received, but if you didn't get an email, let me know. So and I'll forward you.
That's
mine.
the same trip as we took once
Well,
before?
it's slightly different. We're starting at Harry Gardner Park.
Okay.
We're going
yeah.
up to Coldwater and possibly onto the landslide at the outfall.
How bad is it to say yes, but then not show up?
Actually, there are three activities and you can click the ones that you think you can do. If you can't make it, you can't make it. I mean, that's fine. Let us know, because
Well, I just don't know ahead of time whether my sciatica is gonna nail me or not. I mean, I can go 5 miles or I can go 100 yards. I just don't know a priori.
well, we are hoping the governor will grace us with his presence. I don't know if that's an incentive to go or for you not to go, if the governor goes.
No, that would be interesting. Is our representative gonna be there also?
She's not available. She won't be able to go. Although the question is whether we invite the candidates. We did, I mean, we tried to last time and got Gusenkamp. So,
Okay,
So don't think I got the email.
I don't think I did
okay,
either.
I will
That's if you
go
don't-
right now and just send you
Okay,
my notice.
Okay,
It'll come from somebody named Kara Whitman,
okay,
or maybe
Carol Whitman.
Whitman, yeah.
okay, thank you. Okay, with that, we will adjourn. Thanks, Kathy.